Hi, I'm Mark Edward Lewis, and welcome to the Cinema Sound Studio B. You know, mixing is the thing I get asked the most about. Not just stereo, but 5.1 and 7.1 and 3D and all kinds of things. And it seems to be that thing which nobody's really talking about. I'm not talking about music mixing. I'm talking about multimedia mixing. Where does the dialogue go? The ambiences, the sound effects, the Foley, the music, all of it. How do we get that into that cohesive whole? And in the MZ Pro education, we go into it for 25 hours, so you get it all handled. But I want to give you a kind of an overview and hopefully some inspiration for you so that you can get these kinds of techniques and skills and tricks into your mixes. We're going to be looking at Blade of Honor, which is a film we worked on for several months and mixed for several weeks. Let's check it out. All right, let's take a look at this mix just in this scene with Tim Russ and Madison Russ and Julia Morzawa and Aaron Eisenberg. It may not seem like a very complicated situation going on here, but there's a lot going on. We're going to take a look at it and hopefully get you inspired. Take a look.
And you will fear the consequences of your doubt, disobedience. If I am willing to do this, and I have your best interest at heart, then what more will your enemies do when they capitalize on your shortcomings?
All right, so what I want to do is just go through and play each of these individual disciplines. When you're mixing, and I've mentioned this in other videos of ours, and certainly in the 85-hour Cinema Sound Education, of which 25 hours, did I mention 25 before? 25 hours is dedicated to mixing. That's how, I mean, mixing is everything, re-recording mixing, and it takes some time to get it right. But so we're going to check, listen, what I was saying was that having organization around your tracks so that they all of your disciplines go to a single bus or fader so that you can control them all. That's what I'm going to demonstrate here. But first, here in Pro Tools, here's how I've got it organized. And organization is also everything. I've got all of the buses, the surround buses, the down mixing here in the yellow, and having things color coordinated is very helpful. Dialogue is in red, and down here is there's the reverbs for the dialogue. Keep going. Here's the VCA, which then means I'm soloed it. That means that all the dialogue now is all we're going to hear.
You will fear
and all the reverbs. Then we have the sound effects, of which there are many, many, many tracks. All of its reverbs and its buses, the ambiences, its bus, the Foley in brown, reverbs and buses, the music, buses, and some hidden tracks for later reference. All right, let's just listen to the dialogue. And what I want you to listen to is the room. Now, none of this is ADR. There's no ADR here. It's all from set. But it's been super cleaned, like crispy, crunchy cleaned, so that the room has been removed. The reverb in the room has been removed. Not that there was that much of it as a soundstage. But every piece of reverb that you hear, we've created, and everything. So check it out.
Then you will fear the consequences of your doubt and disobedience. If I am willing to do this, and I have your best interest at heart, then what more will your enemies do when they capitalize on your shortcomings?
And there's a little Foley in there, which is actually, we just used it from being on set. Otherwise, that should have been in the Foley tracks. But, you know, on set, if we can get some good on-set Foley, it's good. So that's dialogue. Nothing really earth-shattering there, right? It's just some nice, good, clean dialogue. And we were able to get great sound on set. Here is the sound effects, which I'll go down and kind of show you what's going on with this scene. Some air bending there. Here's some more. Lots of fun little metal pieces going on there for sure. You'll notice on the scene cut, not the scene cut, but the actual cut, this cut from him to his sort of profile, that there are the sound effects drop. And we talk about this in one of the ambience articles that I talk about. You want those scene or picture cuts, the changes in volume or EQ or anything, to be a frame, maybe two, usually after the cut. One frame, so that crossfade happens the frame of the cut, not before, and not 2 or 3 frames long. It just sounds weird. Okay, so let's check out what's next, which will be ambiences. There's a lot of ambiences moving on in here, mainly muted or masked by the music itself, because there's a ton of music going on here. But that doesn't mean that we don't want to have those ambiences in there. You're like, well, that was a sound effect. Well, not really. Just some bells going on in the background, adding some intensity. Well, why weren't those music? Well, because they seemed like ambiences to me, and the composer didn't write them. If you're on good headphones, you can hear that throbbing. And then we're into the ambiences of the Hermes itself in their birthing chamber. So a lot of stuff under there that you're really not going to hear much. But without the ambiences, as we talk about in one of our other articles, it's a huge loss. So that's what's in there. Let's go to the Foley, which is ever exciting. Down here. Lots of robe Foley. Footsteps, to be sure. And none of this was captured on set. And you see the two gentlemen walk up. They've got their little clumps going on there. Including her leather jacket. I don't know if you noticed that. Right there, and her course falling down. Super important. Without the Foley, it just doesn't work. In fact, let's mute this for a second instead of soloing it. Turn off the Foley and see how it feels. In fact, let's turn off the music too, just because it can sometimes give us a false sense of glue. Actually, let's go back here.
Of your doubt and disobedience. If I am willing to do this, and I have your best interest at heart, then what more will your enemies do?
Right? It feels like you're away, you're kept away from everything. And Foley is where the real Hollywood magic begins. All right, and then the music itself, not too hard to understand. It's lots and lots of stems, but let's just solo it for a second so you can get an idea of what that is. And with these disciplines, we basically create everything that we need to create the immersion and the emotional thumbprint, if you will, on our audience and get them immersed in the visuals. Because a silent film sucks, as we discovered, 100 years ago, right? It was so bad, in fact, that they had to have somebody playing music throughout the film to make it work. I also want to show you what we're doing on the buses of the disciplines, which may be lost if we don't do that. Let's see here. Let me go here. And in Pro Tools, you can create buses and VCAs where all the channels are assigned discipline by discipline, and then make a window for them, which is super cool. So let's take a look at what's happening here on the dialogue bus. On the dialogue bus, I have the iZotope Neutron plugin instantiated, which is basically, what is it doing here? Transient shaper. What it's doing is taking the hard crispiness, transients of the dialogue in the high frequencies and smoothing it out. That's what a transient shaper does. You can do it the other way and make it even more crispy, but I didn't need, it was already kind of transienty, so I had, that's what this is here. The high frequencies are being, the attacks are being turned down, the attacks in the mids are being turned down, and the sustains in the low part are being helped a little bit. It's going to be really hard for you to tell on a YouTube video what's happening here, but just know that's what this is doing because there's nothing else happening here. And then I have a de-esser for certain sibilant actors like James Kyson that comes on and off. Then for the sound effects bus, I've got a cool little, edgy, very edgy, kind of upper mid-rangey, high-frequency bump that happens when I really need to punch the sound effects up, and I punch them all up globally using this EQ, and I automate it in or out. The ambience set need no help globally. And then the Foley bus, this is the iZotope EQ, lots and lots of high frequencies with some of the kind of stuff removed, and then the lows removed for all channels. And then the music bus, we talked about this in the music entry. We just basically carve out generally all the frequencies that might interfere with the dialogue and sound effects from the music so that we can bring up the rest of the music. So it's a really important thing to note that, we do mastering on each individual one of our disciplines, and that's one of the things that we can do to create that Hollywood impact on our audience. Yeah, it's a big mix. It's not Hollywood big, but at 256 channels, it's no small little chicken. But keeping things organized and understanding what you want the audience to feel or understand the story or know what's happening and be immersed in sound effects, knowing from moment to moment where you want that to be makes the mix a lot more organized and a lot easier to bite off chunks of until you can eat the whole thing. That's a terrible analogy for mixing, but you get what I'm talking about. Let us know if you have any further questions or send us up your own mixes and we'll happily help you with them on the cinemasound.com forum. Until then, we'll see you in post.
Even if for yourself.